Welcome back to the channel. This is the Action Figure Grader, and Heritage Auctions appears to be trying to make a push into vintage action figures. And they had another auction that ended last night as of the making of this video. And my question was, how are the prices relative to the May kind of premiere auction that they did, where the prices were insane? We covered those prices. Lots of early card backs that were high grade, the rocket firing prototype Boba Fett, and even some of the more common items sold for, in some cases, two or 2.5 times what I consider to be fair market value. And the short answer is for this June auction, the prices were actually pretty good for the most part. There were some pretty good deals to be had. I didn't bid on anything. I was certainly watching a lot of items, mainly just for this video. But for those of you that were actually paying attention and were maybe bidding live, there were some good deals to be had. I was actually really surprised with how low the final sales prices were for some of these very tough to find items. And the question is why? Well, why were the auctions so crazy last month for the premiere featured auction, and then maybe these flew under the radar? I don't know, but it was actually just crazy. Such a dichotomy in price points relative to what happened last month. So let's take a closer look, and you guys can maybe share some feedback as you're leaving me a like for this video if you enjoyed it. The first one is an AFA 85 double telescoping Luke Skywalker Farm Boy. And, you know, it did have a little bit of yellowing to the torso, so it's potentially not really an 85 anymore. I think I would argue that it's probably not an 85 anymore. Clearly, it's got the older case style where the telescoping inner filament is all the way pushed into the saber. Nowadays, they kind of encase it fully extended so you can really see it. So clearly it's an older case style, not the oldest of the old case styles, but it was an AFA 85 and archival case. And it sold, all the prices I'm going to quote, by the way, include the buyer's premium. And the final price was $18.12. which is probably about right. I would say if you sent this back into AFA, you'd probably get like an 80 or an 80 plus. And $18.12 is in that ballpark. I would think a true 85 without any discoloration to the torso is probably more like $2,500 these days. But that's just a wild guess based on what's rattling around in my brain for past sales. Here was a no dent blue snaggletooth AFA 80. That one sold for $750. Again, probably in line with market and what we saw with some of the blue snags that sold in the Hakes auction in their last session. So this was, again, an older case style with the label up top. And, I would say for an AFA 80, that's about what it would sell for on eBay, just like it is. So probably about right again. And that one looks like a very nice example, just an older case style, $750. Now, these prices do not include the sales tax. They do charge sales tax, and if you've never bought on Heritage before, the shipping is actually really reasonable. It's very, very good. I bought a Hulk 181 from them, and even after the buyer's premium and taxes and everything, it worked out to about the same I would have paid on Comic Link or anywhere else, but the shipping was like $35. I mean, it was nothing. Very reasonable prices for shipping, in case you're wondering. But you do have to pay sales tax, just like on eBay. Next up, we had an AFA 70 mail-away Boba Fett. Obviously, got the 70 because of the box. The box condition was pretty rough, but it's tough to find one of these fully complete. And if you could live with a 70, it sold for $1031, which I would argue is about right as well. In higher grade, easily closer to $2,000. So I think that was an appropriate price point and about where I would have priced it. Sometimes Chris over at Rogue 5 Toys, he'll send me some photos of an item and he's not exactly sure where to list it. And I don't know why he asked me, because it's not like I'm some expert or anything, but he oftentimes will ask me to help him price things. And if he had sent me this item, an AFA 70 Boba Fett, I would have actually said maybe even a little higher. I would have guessed $1,200 to $1,300. So $1031 I thought was a pretty good deal there. Here was an AFA 80 C3PO 12 back B that sold for $1125. It was a punched example with a price sticker, but again, I think if something like this was on eBay or Hakes or wherever else, $1125 is right in line. This is nothing out of the ordinary, and that's kind of the running theme for a lot of these items here. Here's a 20 back B AFA 80 Chewbacca beautiful crystal clear blister. That one sold for $875. I mean, really, really fair prices overall. So again, I don't know why some of these items sold for so cheap relative to the last one, but you know, they had some really rare items in this auction, and I gotta believe that if I'm the consigner of these items, whether they're the same consigner or consignors from the last auction, if they had some items in this auction, they have to be disappointed relative to the just blowout prices that we saw in the last one. And if you didn't see that video, at the end of this video, I'll put a link to that heritage video so you can go back and watch that. But you won't believe the prices in that auction. Here was a very tough to find Kenner Canada R2-D2 wind-up. It's a very, very rare item. This one had blister support around it. It was an AFA yellowed 60. I don't see the yellowing, but it apparently did have a yellowed blister. It's very faint. You can kind of see it there. That one still sold for $26.25. And again, I know it's low grade, but you know, in a higher grade, we've seen examples go for 2 or 3 times that price. So again, I thought that was a very fair price for what it was. Here was a Palatoy 45 back FX7. I did check this against the Toy Tony guide, and this was not on the Toy Tony list. This one is just a straight Palatoy. The FX7 on the General Mills card back with the German language on the back, that one is the Toy Tony, but this straight Palatoy was not on that list. So this one was a genuine AFA 80 and a beautiful example for $325. I mean, that was a bargain of a deal. I would have guessed 500 plus easily for a Palatoy FX7 crystal clear blister as well. Here was a 21 back transition card Boba Fett. Now, it was only an AFA 40, so keep that in mind. And there were a number of items like that in this auction as we dig through them. They were fairly low grade, and maybe that's what kept some people away. And you know, they just didn't see anything that really struck their fancy. We didn't have any ultra rare items like the rocket firing Fett or ultra high grade items like AFA 85s here and there. But again, going back to the last video, there were a number of items that the grades don't hold up anymore. The AFA 95 21 back Boba Fett, the 12 back B, I believe it was, AFA 90 Luke Farm Boy with the very clear pink discoloration to the torso. I mean, there was a lot of items like that where the grades are no longer applicable and they sold for just insane money. But anyway, this 21 back ESB Boba Fett, it was only an AFA 40, but it sold for $10.93. That's a very budget-friendly item for those that can deal with the lower grade, but maybe want a Boba Fett on mint on card. I mean, that's about as cheap as you're going to find for an ESB Boba Fett. Really nice deal there. Here was a very rare ESB 6-pack, and that included all of the baggies that go with this, you know, one of the rarest box, you know, multi-packs for baggies that you can find. I mean, they're very, very tough to find. So the box was obviously in rough condition, but it included all the correct baggies, I assume. And that one sold for $2,062. And again, if that box was in higher grade, you know, me personally, if this was like a graded example where the baggies were displayed next to it, and let me know in the comments what you think. But I have a friend of mine who asked me about that. He's got this full set. All the baggies are sealed. He's got a box, and he's like, hey, should I send it in to be graded with the baggies graded next to the box? And his box is in better shape than this one. I told him, yeah, I mean, I think it would look really great to have the baggies displayed next to it versus qualified grading. I don't know. I mean, you know, it's a big box, obviously, to have all the baggies displayed next to it versus maybe sending it in for qualified grading. But you got to have, I think that there's some items that come with the box, maybe a catalog or something like that to go inside there. But nevertheless, this is a very nice set. You know, I don't care what kind of condition it's in. It's just to have this box alone is just really tough to do. So that one sold for $20.62 again. Next up, we've got some tri-logos before we dig into some later card backs. There's some really nice Power of the Force I'm going to show you, as well as some Droids figures. Here was an AFA 75 tri-logo Vader. That one sold for $5.75. Again, very fair and maybe right in line with market. It might be a little high. I mean, there was an AFA 75 that sold on eBay for closer to $4.50 if memory serves, just recently. So that one's even a little higher than where that one sold. Here was an ungraded yak face, but I mean, again, it's mint on card, I assume. I didn't look too closely at the description here. You know, noticeable wear, bending increasing, and it looks like let's see, small tear on the surface under the bubble near the bottom left corner. So this is not really a true mint on card. You can kind of tell there. I think it looks like in that lower left-hand corner. Let's see if we can get a nice zoom on this one. I'm guessing that the pull away is down here on the left-hand side. So that's why it sold for what it did, just because it's not really truly a mint on card. So 906 on that one. And even in this kind of condition, if it was still fully sealed, I think you could probably get 1,500 plus, would be my guess for a fully sealed example in this kind of condition. Here was a proof card, Revenge of the Jedi proof card, AFA 90. And I didn't look too closely at it, but it looks like it maybe had some scuffs to the case. But we noted in the last auction how a lot of those 90s and 85s didn't look that clean. This one looks pretty good. It's just maybe got some scuffing to the case at the bottom of the case there. But overall, pretty clean. And it's one of the main heroes, right? Princess Leia, AFA 90, and it sold for $31.25. And I think that's actually fairly low for what that is. Princess Leia, first 12 on the Return of the Jedi card backs, the actual action figure retail release for these Return of the Jedis are very tough to find, and they can go for $2,000 plus pretty easily in fairly high grade. And so to get the Revenge of the Jedi proof card, AFA 90 for Leia at $31.25, to me, again, I didn't have that kind of money, but if I did have that kind of money and I was in the market for it, that's a price I'd pay. That's a price I'd pay in a heartbeat. Even with the taxes and everything, you're still talking sub $3,500. And, I've seen it go for a lot more than that. So I got to believe that the seller on this one's very disappointed by that sales price. It just seems like the Lukes and the Leias and the Han Solos, the Darth Vaders, R2-D2, those Revenge of the Jedis for those main heroes usually command an even more significant premium than this at $31.25, especially in an AFA 90. So that was a good deal. Some Power of the Force. We had Darth Vader in an AFA 85. That's one sold for $10.93. Again, that's a steal, in my opinion, for an AFA 90. AFA 85. Unpunched, no price sticker. That, maybe not a steal, but I've certainly seen lower grade examples go for pretty close to that price. So that was a good deal, or at least a fair market value. I thought this was a steal for sure. This was an 85 plus Luke Jedi. Moderate yellowing on the lighter end of the scale in terms of yellowing. Unpunched, no price sticker. But again, it was an 85 plus grade. And that one sold for $11.25. Again, AFA 85s can often approach that price. So to get an 85 plus at that price, I thought that was a very good deal. Here was a 75 plus C-3PO removable limbs. That one did have a price sticker and was punched. $229. I've certainly seen them go for more than that ungraded on eBay. So I thought that was a good deal. Han Solo in carbonite. This was a yellowed 80, unpunched, no price sticker. That one sold for $968. Again, a very good price relative to some of the prices that we see very regularly on eBay. Here was a Imperial Gunner, and again, going back to what I was mentioning, some of these were lower grade. I'm imagining that they had cracked blisters because this one got a yellowed 40, and it did have blister support, and it did have a 40 subscore for the blister, so it had a pretty big crack in it. But that one still sold for $325, which is about what those figures go for loose complete. So that's a good deal there. Ben Kenobi, this was a yellowed 80, $487.50, another very low price. Yikes. That's a lot less than I would have expected for an 80 grade. Very good deal there. Here was Luke Skywalker in his X-Wing gear. This one was a yellowed 80, $719 on that one. And again, could it have gone for less on eBay? Maybe, but not by much. I would think $718 is about right for an 80 grade Power of the Force Luke X-Wing. That's a kind of a tougher one to find. It's not as tough as some of the others, but that's a pretty fair price in my mind. This was a great deal. A yellowed 80 Yoda on the Power of the Force. It was punched with a price sticker, but it only sold for $20.62. Which, if you guys follow the Power of the Force line, you know how expensive Yoda is. And this was a very high grade example. And I've seen cracked blister examples go for $1,000 all day long. And this one, again, was a yellowed 80. That's a really, really good deal, I feel like, for one of the tougher Power of the Force figures. Another tough one, this is the New Zealand and Australia exclusive AT-AT driver, and this was an unpunched example. I did have blister support because it was only a 60 grade, so again, a cracked blister on this one, but that's a great display piece and about as budget-friendly as you're going to find for one of the, holy grails. That's a true grail Power of the Force item. This, Nikto, and obviously Anakin Skywalker and the Gamorrean Guard. I mean, some of those are really, really pricey. The Yak Face on the Canadian card, this is definitely one of the top 5 or 6 out there. And that one sold for $2,500 with the buyer's premium. I don't remember. Chris had one of these that was ungraded, but it was primo. I mean, very, very high grade. I forgot what he got for it. I want to say it was $6,000, somewhere in that ballpark. But again, it had no crack to the blister. This one did have a crack in it. Next up, here is one of those rarities. This is the Power of the Force Anakin Skywalker. This one was a yellowed 50 again. And here is the label on it, if I can pull it up. Yeah, so it had a 40 for the blister score. So, again, these are items where they send it in to be graded and have the blister support because of the cracked blister. But, these are true gems and very, very rare. And that one sold for $31.25. And if you compare that to, like, prices for AFA 80s, things like that. We saw one on eBay that was sold, I believe, in an auction, and it got around 6 or 8. I might be thinking of the Yak Face. It was the Kenner Canada Yak Face that sold for about $8,000. But I know that someone had one of these recently. It might have been Hakes, but it was a very high-grade example of memory serves. And usually when they're high-grade, you count on $10,000 plus. So to get one for $31.25, still mint on card, graded mint on card with blister support. I'd almost rather have a lower grade example than a very high grade example and risk the blister cracking. The blister's already cracked on this one, and it's got the blister support. This, to me, seems like a safer investment. But, I just feel like all those AFA 80s, eventually they're all going to crack and crumble anyway. So I thought, to me, this would be the better way to go from a budget perspective, but there's going to be some people out there that want the highest of the highest grade, and I would just be terrified of those blisters cracking. Some Droids figures. This was a Canadian Kia Mall. This was a yellowed 85. Very nice example though. Unpunched, no price sticker. Very faint yellowing to it. That one sold for $387.50. Pretty good deal there. We had a 75 grade C-3PO on the Droids card back. This was the US card back. No price sticker, unpunched, for $600. That's right in line with recent sales we've seen on eBay. Here was the always very in high demand Tig Fromm AFA 75. We know this one's a clear blister since it was made in the Lily Letty factory. $718. I mean, that's a great deal. I mean, I've seen Tig Fromm this year, loose ungraded, go for $600 plus. This is a mint on card graded AFA 75 for $718. So that was an absolute bargain. And then here was Sice Fromm. This card did have some creasing to it. If I had to guess, this is probably like a 75, somewhere in that ballpark. But it was unpunched. It did have the KB Toys $199 price sticker. That one sold for $13.75. And again, that's about right. I think if you get that one graded, you probably got some equity there. AFA 75s for this are approaching $2,000 pretty regularly now that we see. So pretty decent deal there. And here was an 80-plus Droids A-Wing pilot. I mean, there's an AFA 85 on eBay right now that's already over $2,500. So for this 80-plus to sell for $13,1250, that is, I mean, a very, very good deal relative to the one that hasn't even closed yet on eBay. Finally, another very fair deal was a yellowed 75 Droids Boba Fett. That one sold for $51.25. Really, really good deal. There was an AFA yellowed 80 that just sold on eBay, I believe, last night. And it was in that ballpark. It might have been a little higher. It might have been around closer to $6,000. So this one was in line with those numbers. And this one is one that has really come down. If you remember, maybe a year and a half ago, they were very consistently over $10,000, $10,000 to $15,000. I think the highest price I remember off the top of my head, one of these selling for was an AFA 85 that sold for $18,000. So this one has really dropped like a rock in terms of price. But, you know, overall, there were some very good deals in this auction relative to the last one. And again, if you missed the auction results from that insanity that was the May premiere auction or featured auction from Heritage, check out the video in the link that shows up at the end of this video. It's pretty incredible. So thank you as always for watching, and I'll be back soon.